There's a performance review that never makes it into any 360 assessment. It doesn't come from your board, your boss, or your team. It comes from inside you and it runs 24 hours a day. You're not strategic enough. You were too soft at that meeting. They're going to figure out you don't know what you're doing. If that voice sounds familiar, you are not alone. But here's what most leadership development programs never tell you. That voice doesn't just affect how you feel about yourself, it also shapes how you lead. It shapes how you hire, how you fire, how you build or quietly break the people around you. This video's for you if you've ever wondered why some of your leadership decisions feel reactive, risk averse, or quietly punishing, even when you know better. Stay until the end. I'm going to walk you exactly how the inner critic infiltrates leadership behavior and what structured self awareness and data informed insight can do to interrupt it. Save this video for later. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell. This is the first episode in another series that we're beginning, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Hello, I'm Dr. RB. I'm a licensed psychologist in Florida and New York, and I am the president of Influence. If you're returning to my channel, welcome back. And if you're new here, I'm really glad that you found your way. At Influence, we work at the intersection of organizational psychology, authentic leadership, and the inner life of leaders. Our belief is simple. Before you can lead others well, you need to understand what is leading you. Today, we begin a new series, The Inner Critic, and we're starting right here at the place most leadership development ever goes, the boardroom within. The inner critic isn't just self doubt, it's not imposter syndrome, it's not a personality flaw. In depth psychology, it's understood as a complex, a semi autonomous pattern in the psyche that carries its own voice, its own logic, and its own agenda. Carl Jung defined a complex as an emotionally charged cluster of thoughts, memories, and beliefs that operates somewhat independently from the conscious ego. It has a history. It has a consistent set of convictions about you, about your worth, and about what happens when you fail. The complex is usually formed in early childhood around experiences of conditional approval, performance, pressure, and even shame. If love and belonging depended on achievement, the psyche learned there is a standard that must be maintained, and there must be a voice to enforce it. That voice became the inner critic. Now, here's why leaders are especially vulnerable. Leadership selects for high achievers, and high achievers are often driven, at least in part, by that voice. They learned early to perform, exceed, and never show weakness. The inner critic was the engine underneath the ambition. For a while, it works until you're leading a team of 20 people, and the same internal voice that drove your career is now driving your decisions about other people's careers. Now, when that happens, the inner critic stops being a personal psychological issue. It becomes an organizational one. Let me give you 5 patterns to watch for in yourself and in the leaders around you. 1, micromanagement. When the inner critic says, if I don't control this, it will fall apart, and that will prove I'm a failure as a leader. The leader then tightens the grip, not because the team is incapable, because the leader cannot tolerate the anxiety of uncertainty. Number 2, withholding feedback. This seems opposite to micromanagement, but it comes from the same place. The inner critic says, if I give hard feedback, they fall apart or turn on me. That means I'm a bad leader. So nothing gets said. The team member never grows. The problem quietly compounds. 3, oscillating praise and harshness. High warmth when the critic is quiet, sharp, sudden criticism when it's triggered. Team members feel like they're walking on eggshells because they are. The leader's internal weather is forecasting their management style. Number 4, project incompetence. A leader who secretly fears their own inadequacy will sometimes unconsciously look for evidence that others are inadequate too. They become hypercritical of work in ways that are more about inner anxiety than actual performance, using the team as a screen for their own unresolved material. 5, avoidance of difficult decisions, letting a performance issue drag on for 6 months, delaying the restructure, never quite having that conversation. The inner critic says, what if I'm wrong? What if they hate me? What if I ruin their career? And the decision hangs at a cost to everyone involved. These are not moral failures. They are psychological patterns. And the first step toward changing them is simply naming them. Because when you name them, then you're observing them. And that is very important. The most dangerous moment in leadership isn't when you make a bad strategic call. It's when your inner critic becomes a people decision on your behalf and you don't even realize it happened. When you pass someone over for a promotion, are you reading their data or were you reacting to something in them that reminded you of your own fear of failure? When you hired someone quickly, was it because their fit was to the role or because they made you feel safe? Data doesn't remove the human element from people decisions, but it creates a pause, a gap between the inner critic's verdict and your action. And in that gap is where authentic leadership really lives. So let me introduce something that might feel counterintuitive in a conversation about inner work. Data is a form of psychological self-correction. When leaders make decisions, hiring, promotion, performance management, team design, they almost universally believe they're being objective. Research, though, tells us otherwise. A 2026 Deloitte Human Capital Trends report confirms what organizational psychologists have known for decades. Subjective leadership judgment is consistently influenced by unconscious bias, emotional reaction, and yes, unresolved inner material. What structured assessment provides is not the removal of human judgment, it's a check on the parts of your psychology that are operating below your awareness. When you have validated psychometric data, behavioral anchors, multi-rater feedback, you're not bypassing your humanity. You're creating accountability for the parts of you that make decisions in the dark. Let me give you a clinical example. I worked with a senior leader, let's call her Marina, who consistently described one direct report as not leadership material. No evidence, just a gut feeling she was certain about. When we introduced structured assessments, the data told a completely different story. This direct report scored in the top quartile on strategic thinking and relational intelligence. She was introverted. She didn't perform confidence the way Marina's inner critic had decided that leadership should look like. Marina's inner critic had been making a personal decision disguised as professional judgment. The assessment created a pause. And in that pause, Marina was able to make a different choice. The most important leadership shift happening right now, confirmed across every major HR research body in 2026, is this: authenticity and purpose can no longer live only in the mission statement. They have to show up in the moment, in the hiring decision, the performance conversation, the team meeting, when pressure is high and the inner critic is loudest in exactly those moments. High stakes decisions are when the old voice rushes in with its warnings. That's not a coincidence. That's the structure of the complex. It activates under threat. So here is a practice I give to leaders I work with. Before any significant decision, pause and ask these 3 questions. Number 1, what does the data say? Not what your gut says right now. What does the actual evidence, assessments, performance records, behavioral patterns over time tell you? The data. Number two, what does the inner critic say? Listen for the voice. It might say, this person makes me uncomfortable, or I can't afford to be wrong here, or they remind me of someone I don't trust. Name it, write it down if you need to. Naming it is not a weakness, it's a psychological hygiene. And number three, if I were leading from my values, not from my fear, what would I do? It's that third question is where the authentic leadership lives, not in the absence of the inner critic, but in the choice to not let it have the final word. The inner critic doesn't go away when you're promoted. It doesn't disappear when you're named VP, partner, or even CEO. If anything, the higher the stakes, the louder the volume. But leadership maturity isn't the absence of the inner critic. It's the development of a witness, a part of you that can observe the voice, hold it with some compassion, and then choose differently. Structured assessment is one tool. Coaching and therapy are others. Reflective practice, journaling, peer consultation, honest conversation with someone you trust, like a mentor, these are others still. What they all have in common is this: they create a gap between the inner voice and the outer action. That gap, however small, is the territory of authentic leadership. If this series is speaking to something you're working through in your leadership, I'd love to have you join the EQ Executive newsletter on LinkedIn. I go deeper on these themes every month, specifically for leaders and teams navigating exactly this terrain. Link is in the description below. If today's message resonated, I invite you to subscribe, like, or share. It helps this work reach those who need it the most. And as always, this is Dr. RB. You are loved, you are guided, and your path is most sacred. Take good care of your soul.